Hello there, welcome to Bryan Lomax Movie Talk and the latest 31 on 31. Yes, it's October the 31st and it's that time of year again where me and a few of my buddies, we all get together and we do a 31 ranking list. So we take several different franchises. Those franchises together, when you add up all the films that are within them, make 31 movies and we rank them on the 31st. Yes, so this year, obviously I'm doing it because, well, you know that, you're here, you can see that I'm doing it. But as usual, Cody Leach, who instigated this whole affair, he'll be doing it. CP from Willie Screedia, and also joining us this year is Sean Chandler. So yeah, once you've seen my video, go and check out theirs if you haven't already. But yeah, 31 movies. Franchises are a bit all over the place this year, so let's see if I can remember them. We've got Jaws, we've got Jeepers Creepers, we've got Critters, we've got Alien, we've got Predator, we got The Thing, we've got It. So yeah, quite a few. I don't know if I've left any out there, but if so, you'll find out when we get to them. But bit of a mixed bag, must be said. I will say that previous years, the top end has been a bit more. Yeah, there's been quite a few more decent films in. This is kind of half and half. The bottom half of this list is quite horrible, it must be said. The top half, though, is pretty damn good. So, without further ado, starting from my least favourite, working my way to the best, let's kick in with this year's 31 on 31. At number 31 is Jaws 3D. Yes, I was expecting Jaws the Revenge to be bottom, to be honest, just given its reputation. But I watched Jaws 3D and man was I bored. Really, really bored. That is the best I can say about it. The special effects as well are absolutely terrible. I can't believe that even in 3D they would have worked all that well, and not even Dennis Quaid can save this from being an absolute dumpster fire. Speaking of dumpster fires, we've got number 30, which is Critters Attack. Now, it pains me to put this here, pains me, because if you know me, if you know my channel, you'll know that I am a bit of a Critters fan. I actually do really like the Critters franchise. This film, however, is an absolute stinker, mostly because of the script. We get some really good Critters action, you know, they've gone all out to show us some nice bloody Critters action. I'm not swearing there, I mean literally bloody on-screen blood. But yeah, but the script is terrible. You've got this central character whose primary motivation in life is to get into this particular university, and that's it. It's about her coming to terms with the fact she's not going to get in, and it's just yawn. At number 29, we've got Jeepers Creepers 3. The first one is a pretty damn good horror film. The second one is not great, but it's still quite entertaining. This one, it's hard to believe it's by the same creative force behind the first two. You know, like mostly with sequels, when you have diminishing returns, I understand it. You get other people who take over, you know, they didn't instigate the franchise, so that the characters aren't really theirs, and then they screw them up. But you got the same writer-director on all three of the Jeepers Creepers films, and the quality of them just goes down. You've got a really great first film, an average second film, and this monstrosity that, yeah, it's not even a proper sequel. It's kind of a prequel slash sidequel. It's teases things that we're probably never going to see, and it does stuff with the lore that just doesn't make sense, and it mostly takes place in broad daylight, which for the most part just isn't scary in a horror film. It's a bizarre concoction. At number 28 is Jaws the Revenge. Like I say, not as bad as its reputation would make it out to be, but still a pretty terrible film nonetheless. I think Michael Caine is very watchable in the scenes he is in, and it's probably that which puts it above the third film for me. Beyond that, it is pretty dumb. It's pretty stupid. A shark is out for revenge. Number 27 is Gremlins 2. Pretty terrible film, must be said. John Glover, highly entertaining. His character is a bit of a kind of airheaded, high-flying businessman, but with a pretty good heart. He's kind of like the antithesis of the character he played in Smallville, Lionel Luthor. It's just, yeah, it's bizarre to see. I like him on screen, he's a great presence, but beyond that, the film is just terrible. The gags don't work. It's just not a good sequel. I applaud the postmodernism that is in there, that, you know, like Scream kind of mostly takes credit for, and Wes Craven's New Nightmare. But yeah, Gremlins 2, it's very postmodern. There's a lot of stuff in there where, you know, they talk to the audience, and yeah, self-reference and all that. So that's quite clever. I applaud them for it. It's just that they needed better gags, and they certainly needed a better film on the whole. And number 26 is Alien Resurrection. This is a film that I used to really love. First time I watched it, loved it. And just with each viewing over the years, my love for it has diminished to the point where now I just think it's a plain bad film. I think there's a good script in there somewhere, but it's been butchered. Whether that's by studio interference or director interpretation, I don't know. But yeah, just some random ass moments in it that look like they're from some kind of comedy sketch. The bit where the guy pulls the brain out from the back. Just, what is that doing in an Alien film? Seriously, the tone is so wrong for this franchise. The horrible alien-human hybrid at the end, and the seeming influenza condition that the aliens in this film have. They are literally dripping with slime. They've never been this slimy throughout the whole franchise, and it's just weird. Number 25 is Alien Resurrection on a budget. That's right, Critters 4. It even stars Brad Dourif, who is also in Alien Resurrection, and it pretty much follows the same plot, in which a group of people on a spaceship dock with a much bigger spaceship run by a military organisation who are doing experiments with aliens, in this case, critters, and then said group of people from spaceship have to make the way around the bigger spaceship, killing them, and yeah, getting wiped out in the process. It's Alien Resurrection, but it predates Alien Resurrection and stars one of the main stars of Alien Resurrection, which really makes me question where the idea for Alien Resurrection came from. It's not a great film, but just the fact that it's on a minuscule budget compared to Alien Resurrection is what puts it slightly above it. The biggest disappointment for it is that there's barely any critters in it. There's not a right lot of critters action. They're trying to build these characters and whatnot, but really you don't care about them. You just want to see critters doing what critters do, and because there's not much of that until towards the end of the film, it's definitely a lesser entry into the franchise. And number 24 is Critters 3. This is Leonardo DiCaprio's film debut. It's rough around the edges, I'll say that. The characters in it are serviceable at best, although there are some that are quite amusing. But there's lots of critters action in it. It confines most of the film to this one location, which is a tower block, and it just gets a group of characters who are going up against a bunch of critters. And as a fan of the first two movies, I enjoy it. Anyone who turns around and says this is a rubbish film, totally get why you would say that, but it does something for me just as a fan of those first two movies. And number 23 is Alien versus Predator. There's a good concept in here. I like the way in which they get the excuse they find for getting the aliens and the predators together, and the excuse they have for putting a group of human beings within that. I just think It's directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. 20 cuts where 5 would do. He doesn't know how to write dialogue. Missed opportunity, could have been better. And number 22 is It Chapter 2. This suffers from being excruciatingly bloated and bungling the origin story of Pennywise. Now, I know it's from the book, so there's nothing you can do about that. If you're going to adapt the book, you have to adapt the book. But I just feel like Stephen King, I guess, dropped the ball on the origin. The moment we learn what Pennywise is, where he comes from, it just becomes like, okay. The grown-up versions of these characters just aren't quite as interesting as when they were kids. It's a mess, plain and simple. And number 21 is Jeepers Creepers 2. This is a film that when I first saw it, really didn't like it. I thought it was terrible. And yeah, it's not improved much over the years, but it's I can take it on its own terms now. I can enjoy it. I can have fun with it. There's definitely some stuff in there that's a bit, if you know the director's history, it kind of does make you go, okay. Beyond that, there's some good scares, there's some good action, but can I honestly call it a good film? No, probably not. Number 20 is Gremlins. This is the film on my list that I believe to be the most overrated of the bunch. Now, Gremlins is considered a classic in many quarters. I think nostalgia plays a huge part in that. But when you watch the film today, if you're very objective about it, it really doesn't hold up. There's no logic, there's no internal logic. The story doesn't make sense much. You've got these rules that the Gremlins have, and it's kind of like those rules don't make any sense because technically any time could be after midnight. I could have done with a bit more clarity there, like don't feed them between the hours of midnight and 1 maybe, but no, just don't feed them after midnight. And it's like, okay, well that's any time of the day then. So it's stuff like that where it's not enough attention has been paid to the details, but the details are quite important within the mythology of these creatures. I think it's got some nice cinematography on it, some nice puppetry work, but sometimes it does get a little bit too silly, a little bit too slapstick, and the horror element kind of then takes a bit of a back seat to something else instead that doesn't quite work as well for me as it does in, say, the Critters franchise. At number 19 is Jaws 2. This is a sequel that is really better than it had any right to be, but it's still not a classic. It definitely doesn't reach the heights of the first film, not by a long stretch. But if you are going to do a sequel to a Spielberg classic, then yeah, you could do a lot worse. It has a pretty solid story. You get Roy Schneider coming back, so there's some continuity there with the characters. I like where we find him. It does repeat a few of the beats from the first film, and the climax just isn't quite as gripping as the first film. But it's a solid 3-star film, so I would recommend it. Pardon me. At number 18, speaking of the most overrated film on the list, I would say this is the most underrated film on the list. Again, not a classic. I'm not going to put this up there with the best films on this list, but Alien v Predator 2 Requiem, so AVP 2. Yes, it is very dark at times, and you can't see what's going on. But if you watch this at night with the lights out, you kind of you circumvent that problem. I do prefer the tone of this much more. I think the characters are better handled. I think the dialogue is much more believable and better handled. I prefer the setting. I think it goes for a setting that is more akin to Predator than Alien, because we have the kind of forestry of Vancouver and whatnot. But it's shot in Vancouver, so as a result, it does have that kind of TV vibe about it, where all these TV shows are shot in Vancouver. But I do think that the directors do a better job than what Paul Anderson does with his film. Number 17 is Critters 2. I have a bit of a blast with this film. It's stupid, it's cheesy, it's all over the place. It's just, it's very low budget, but I like it. I think it's nostalgia that plays a part, definitely. I'm not going to deny that. I think if you look at my cohorts who are doing this 31 on 31 this year, I think this is probably going to figure pretty low compared to me. I don't know. I've not seen their lists yet, but I like it. Nostalgia plays a part, and it's just, yeah, I can have a blast with it. It's very entertaining, very slapstick, but in a good way. It's not going for dark horror at any point. Like if you look at Gremlins, there's moments in that where they go dark, they go serious, like the bit where the girl tells the story about her father, and it does get quite, ooh, that's heavy, and then it goes into full on slapstick, and it's like the tone is all over the place. Whereas Critters is just, yeah, it keeps that slapstick tone throughout, most of it, to be honest. It never tries to get too serious. And so it knows what it is, and it does it quite well, I think, on a budget. At number 16 is It. This is the made-for-TV version. Now, technically, it was in 2 parts. So really, this should be 32 on 31. But we'll skip past that. Taken as a whole, it's good. It's well done for its time. I think it has dated. It's not quite as scary as it once was. Not by a long shot. I mean, I remember seeing this as a kid, and it put the fear of God into me. You know, the bit where the guy's been sucked into the tube and his body kind of folds in half. That always stuck with me. That image, it was just always lodged in there. And then I watched it not so long ago for this 31. I was just like, oh. Okay, that was a childhood fear that has just been completely dispelled because it's just not as scary. I think Tim Curry is still pretty good in the role, but again, it's quite dated. It just doesn't have the impact it once did. But the story itself is pretty good. I like this story that takes place over 2 kind of generations, where we see them as kids and then as adults, and revisiting their childhood nightmares and stuff. I think it is a very good story. I've never read the book, so I don't know if the issues that seem to be prevalent in both the film adaptations are really there in the book. But yeah, it still suffers from a lot of the same stuff, which is that finale, that final, the climactic moment where they face Pennywise and he becomes a big spider is just a bit, okay, great, big alien spider. Not really scary. It wasn't scary back then, and it's not scary now either. And number 15 is Alien 3. So this is David Fincher's first film, and it is a film that he's all but disowned. I'm pretty sure it's going to feature very low on Cody's list. I know he really doesn't like it. I go for the assembly cut. They don't call it a director's cut because, as I say, Fincher doesn't really want anything to do with it. So it's the cut that they've reassembled from all the negatives and stuff, and tried to make it as closer to the vision that Fincher had when he was making it before all the interference. But yeah, it's still not a classic. It's certainly not up there with the first 2 Alien films, but it's pretty solid. It is a good film. It still suffers from the fact that they kill 2 major characters right at the beginning, which really dampens the spirits from the off. But once you get over that hurdle and you think, well, okay, with that in mind, what is the story for Ripley? What is her journey once we get that fact? And I think they do pretty well with it. It's a pretty good movie. I like the setting. I like the cinematography. And yeah, there's some pretty good chilling moments in there. Number 14 is The Predator, the Shane Black iteration from the franchise. Not quite as bad as people make out, to be honest. I actually really like it. I've seen it a couple of times now. There's one moment in it that really annoys me, which is when a major character gets taken out and it's barely noticeable. And he's a bad guy, he's a government agent, and all the way through the film you're expecting him to come to blows at some point with like one of the main leads, and he doesn't. He gets taken out by a predator in a blink and you miss it scene, to the point where I got to the end of the film the first time round, I'm like, what happened to that dude? So yeah, that was a sore point for me in the film. Beyond that, it's actually quite a decent flick, and I don't quite get the level of hatred it gets for a Predator film. It's pretty solid. And number 13 is Predators. This is directed by Nimrod Antal. It gets back to the flavour of the original film, being set in a jungle, but not a earthly jungle, rather a jungle on the Predator homeworld. It's very good. I like the way it's directed. I like the action. There's some nice kind of character dynamics there, some nice twists in some of the characters there. I was a bit gutted that it didn't do all that well, to be honest. Not well enough to get a direct sequel, because I would have liked to have seen Adrian Brody's character take the forefront, I guess, in the franchise. I think he was a solid character to have lead the franchise after, Danny Glover and Arnold Schwarzenegger. But yeah, it doesn't look like we're ever going to see that materialise again, and probably not going to see any of the characters from Shane Black's film materialise again. So back to the drawing board, I guess. But no, it's a good film, really good film. And number 2 is Predator 2. I can understand anyone saying this is a bad film. It is over the top in the extreme. It kind of feels like a bit of a leftover from the RoboCop 80s action movie generation kind of thing. It's at the turn of the 90s, and it's like it's still kind of latching on to that vibe that those extremely violent 80s action movies had. And it's very over the top. It shows us a city. Is it Los Angeles? I think it's LA. That kind of doesn't exist. It's just, yeah. It's a very extreme version of LA that just doesn't exist. But if you can get your head around that, it's very entertaining. I think Danny Glover does a good job. I really like that we get to see more of the Predator in this. Obviously, they don't need to hide it as much because we've seen it in the first one now. We know what they look like. There's no point doing the whole Jaws building of tension till we finally get the reveal scene. So no, they just go all out, show it right off the bat. We know what we're dealing with, and then just get straight into the action. Again, it's not the best made film, but it's just highly entertaining. Number 11 is the recent prequel of The Thing called The Thing, which is quite confusing. Just kind of make you think it's going to be a remake, but it's not. It's a prequel, and it's pretty good. It's a damn shame that they didn't use the practical effects. Apparently they shot this film with a whole bunch of practical effects, and later, based at the behest of the studio, they swapped them all for CGI. And it really hinders the film. It stops what should be, I think, a 4.5 star film from being a 4.5 star film, and in fact turns it into like a 3.5 star film. But it's still really solid. And if you match it up to the original, that isn't technically the original, because The Thing from Another World is really the original, and the John Carpenter film is a remake, but we won't go there. We've decided to leave that off. So technically this should be 33 on the 31st. But yeah, if you match it up to John Carpenter's film, if you watch it first and then watch John Carpenter's film straight after, it fits in really well. There's a lot of stuff there they don't need to explain. Like a lot of the time when they do prequels, I'm of the mind that you don't need to show me everything. But here on this occasion, it does kind of work. Seeing how all the marks on the doors get there and things embedded in the walls, and you literally see it in this, and then you watch John Carpenter's film and it's all there, the aftermath, and you know exactly how it happened. So it all matches up pretty well. It's a solid film, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead is great. As we get into the top 10 now, I think the top 10 is pretty stacked on this list. I think all of these films are really great. I would say this is probably the best top 10 we've had on a Horror 31. Maybe. It's got some of my favourite movies in it anyway, so let's get into it. At number 10 is It Chapter 1. Now, I still think that this film stands on its own. Obviously, I think that was purposeful. They made it so that if it bombed, then it would still it'd still work on its own terms, and I think it does. I think you can watch this and leave it there and not have to go and watch chapter 2, which is pretty much where I'm at, to be honest. I will be quite happy to watch part 1 again, but as far as I'm concerned, part 2, I can take it or leave it. But this is a very solid film. I think it does rely on some jump scares a bit too much, but I still think it does a very good job of constantly keeping you you're tense and wondering what's going to happen throughout. I think Pennywise is pretty scary, and I love the cast of child actors. I think they do a really great job with their characters. Number 9 is Jeepers Creepers, the first Jeepers Creepers film. This is one of the best horror films of the noughties, I feel. I think that the tone shifts halfway through the film when it kind of becomes a monster movie, because at first it feels like a human villain doing despicable things, and then it turns out to be a monster movie. If you can get your head around that tonal shift and go for the ride, then I think you'll enjoy it quite a lot. But I think the atmosphere in it is great. The scares are great. Just seeing some of the sickening things that the creeper has done and gotten up to is really twisted. And I like the two central characters, this brother and sister that kind of get put through the ringer. There's some really tense moments, particularly when Justin Long's character goes down into the pit where all these bodies are stored. So great film. Regardless of your thoughts of the director, you can say what you want about that guy, but the film itself, very good horror film. Number 8 is Critters. Yes, as I've said, I'm a big Critters fan, and it is primarily because of this film. Now, all the sequels, I can to some extent take or leave them, and the ones that I do like, I only really like because of my affection for the first film. But I will, hand on heart, say that I genuinely believe Critters to be a good film. I think it is better than Gremlins. It is a Gremlins knockoff. I won't dispute that. Gremlins came out and it was very successful, so a lot of companies got in on that action, started making little monster movies, and this was one of them. I just so happen to think that it's the best one, and it is better than Gremlins. It's a more solid film. I think the story, the structure is handled a lot better. The characters are better. I think the tone is better handled. I think it knows what it is, so to speak. And it runs with that. And I like the isolation of being in this, mostly taking place in this one house. It's also quite a short film. I think it's like 80 minutes. It's got a short running time, so it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's very tightly edited. It's just a blast. As a 9-10-year-old, it was my favourite movie. Admittedly, my catalogue of movies that I'd seen at that age was very slim, but I must have seen this film about 80 times across a 1-year period. I would come home from school every day and boom, I'd stick Critters on. I loved it. I still love it. Very much a nostalgia thing, but also I genuinely believe it to be a good film. It is let down by a very low budget. I think sometimes some of the special effects in it, it shows. But I kind of don't care because I think the story, I think the characters, I think the concept is handled really well. Number 7 is Prometheus. So this is, the start of Ridley Scott's prequel series, which I'm really hoping he gets to finish at some point. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But no, I love this, and obviously I love Covenant even more because I've not mentioned Covenant yet. But Prometheus is let down a little bit by some stupid characters. You got some characters that really shouldn't be there, quite frankly. For a mission that it has such a responsibility placed on their shoulders, and they're like, and I know you can kind of level that criticism at Covenant. So yeah, I realise that I'm being quite hypocritical there, but I don't know, for some reason the bad characters in this one resonated more with me than they do in Covenant. But no, It's a very good film. I think the exploration of faith, religion, our origins, where we come from, it raises a lot of questions without giving you a load of answers, which is good because it leaves you to ponder them yourself and come up with your own answers. So yeah, I liked it. I liked the central characters. I particularly love David. I think he's an incredibly realised character. One of the best characters, original characters in cinema in recent years that we've had. And I like that it is essentially his story. You know, this and Covenant is essentially his story. And number 6 is Alien Covenant. And the reason I like this film so much is just because of the way it explores the themes of faith. And again of our origins. I think it does it really well. Just this idea that without faith, without something to believe in of a higher power nature, then we will find the darkest parts of ourselves taking over and taking us to places that perhaps we don't want to go. I think it's an incredible film. I've done a video essay on it over on my other channel, The Movie Evangelist. So if you want to find out why I love the film so much, do go over and check that out. But for me personally, it's very underrated. A lot of the criticisms of it fall flat. Not all of them. I think there are some genuine criticisms of the film that do hold up, but I feel like people got the knives out for this film in such a big way that they went overboard and just tried to find every little thing they could and blow it out of proportion. And it's just, incredibly underrated, really good film, and just one of the best Alien movies. Number 5 is Jaws. This is undoubtedly a classic. It is brilliant. It's let down now and even back then by the special effects. Bruce the shark, kind of the problems, the endless problems they had with that damn shark, are legendary. It does let the film down in some places, but where the film succeeds big time is in Spielberg's direction, his use of the camera, and the characters, these 3 core characters, particularly once they get out to sea and they're sharing time together on this boat. It's gripping. And that one elongated scene where the captain goes into his history about being on the USS Indianapolis is it's really spine tingling. It's a great character moment, and just for all 3 of them. It just adds depth, real depth to these 3 men. One of them in particular, in what is essentially, a popcorn flick. But that's something that Spielberg is very good at doing. He does these big budget popcorn summer flicks, but he injects them with a lot of character and really great stories. So Jaws, absolute classic, without a doubt. Number 4 is Predator. Yes, this is the best Predator film, and yes, it is one of the best action films of the 80s. It featured pretty highly on my recent top 10 Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and for good reason. Excellent creature design, brilliant action sequences, fantastic characters and interactions, beautiful one-liners, over the top, as all the best 80s action movies are, and just great stuff. Number 3 is John Carpenter's The Thing. This is a film that flopped big time at the box office. The critical reception to it was abysmal. It looked like it was pretty much going to sink John Carpenter's career. And then, hey, justice was done. People started to watch it. People started to take notice. Critics changed their mind. And now it is quite rightly considered a classic. It was ahead of its time. That's a simple fact of the matter. It came out at a time when people didn't want pessimism. They wanted optimism. But it is a very politically driven, politically minded film, that kind of looks at the landscape, the political landscape of America at that time, and kind of feeds it into a science fiction epic. It's like I say, it's got a very downbeat ending. It's all about the paranoia of the enemy from within, people turning against each other, destroying ourselves by being skeptical of each other, and again, like I say, paranoid of each other. It's just fantastic. The way that Carpenter builds that paranoia, that sense that anybody could be the thing, is really great. There's some fantastic special effects that still hold up. Even though some of them do look plastic, do look a bit wooden in the way they move, because they're physical, because they're something tangible that you feel you could reach out and touch, they still work. And number 2 is Alien, Ridley Scott's original Alien movie. Absolutely love this film. I do think the pace obviously is quite slow by today's standards. I understand when people say, it's just too slow for me. I found it a bit dull. I understand that. But it's an immersive experience. You feel like you're in this world with these people, doing this job that they're all bored by. The ship is quite dirty and mucky because it's a mining ship, and they're called to a mission to do something that becomes completely life-threatening, and it's just that slow unveiling of this alien life form and what it is, and the processes, the steps it goes through to becoming the alien from the from the egg stage to the alien stage. It's gripping, it's immense, it's unlike anything we'd ever seen before, at the time that this came out, and it gave way to a whole host of rip-offs, none of which have ever been as good. It's just, the production design is fantastic. Ridley Scott's direction is fantastic. The characters are great. You've got a central female character that wasn't written as female, but Ridley Scott just decided, that'll work. But the script was just that good. It didn't play on gender. It didn't have any statements to make about gender. It just so happens that when you make that character a female, it has no bearing basically on the script, no bearing at all. It just so happens that it's a woman, and it's just a strong character. That fact that she is a woman will go on to play an integral part in the sequel, James Cameron's sequel, Aliens, which is, of course, my number 1. Incredible film. I have reviewed these Alien films on my channel, so if you want to find my in-depth thoughts. But as I say, the fact that Ripley is a woman, that wasn't an integral part of her character in the original film. It is here, but not because they're making any kind of female empowerment statement. No, it's a film about motherhood. That is the theme that runs throughout the film. It is dealt with through the character of Ripley, through the knowledge that she did have a child back home that is now dead because she's been in suspended animation for so long. And then you're dealing with the aliens themselves that have a queen, have a mother, and everything ties together with this little girl Newt, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It's fast paced. There's lots of action. The production design is incredible. James Cameron does an immense job with the directing. It still holds up. The special effects are fantastic. It is an absolute sci-fi action horror masterpiece. Like I say, I think it depends on what style of film you like as to whether you like this one more or Alien more. But either way, they're both 5-star classics. But this is my number 1. I just love the all-out action fest that this film is. But yeah, there you go. That is this year's 31 on 31 from me. That is my list. Now, do please remember when you're leaving your comments, this is subjective. If you're going to be offensive and going to start hurling insults at me in the comments, I'm just not going to respond to you, so it's going to fall on deaf ears. But if you've got a genuine opinion that you want to share, I'm happy to hear it. Let's have a conversation. What do you think of my list? Tell me what yours is, what your favourites, what your least favourites. And then obviously, if you haven't already, do check out Cody Leach's video, do check out Willie Screedy's video, and do check out Sean Chandler's video. However, that is my list. I have finished. Thank you for watching, and until next time, cracking.